Welcome to the Explainer. So today we are shining a really bright light into what is, without a doubt, astrology's most notoriously confusing, heavily debated, and, frankly, feared topic. We're talking about the 12th house. If you've spent any time at all looking at birth charts or hanging around astrological forums, you already know this placement has a major reputation. It's the final chapter of the zodiac, this place wrapped in mystery where the rules of the material world just simply stop working. But we have to ask, is it really a cosmic curse, or is it just a deeply misunderstood treasure chest? Let's find out.
Okay, let's dive into this, because the fear is very real. On one intensely debated Reddit thread on advanced astrology, a user bluntly put it like this. It's the big bad as far as houses go, alongside the 6th and the 8th. People genuinely panic when they see planets clustered in their 12th house. They hear words like isolation, loss, and secret enemies, and they just immediately assume they're doomed to a life of misery. But is the 12th house truly the worst real estate in the zodiac?
To make sense of all this, we're going to follow a roadmap so we don't get lost in the cosmic ocean. First, we'll look at the House of Secrets, then the traditional versus modern views, followed by navigating the cosmic ocean, Chiron and the unseen wound, and finally, surrender, healing, and integration.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the House of Secrets. So, in the astrological wheel, the 12th house is the absolute final chapter. It sits right before the ascendant, which represents birth and the self, so you can think of it as the realm just before birth, where the ego totally dissolves back into the universe before a new cycle even begins. According to Tarot's Tarot, this house governs literally everything beneath our conscious awareness. It's a wild, paradoxical mix. We're talking the subconscious mind, repressed memories, and hidden enemies. It actually rules physical institutions of confinement too, like hospitals, prisons, and monasteries. It governs our most vivid dreams, our psychic impressions, and the ways we subconsciously sabotage ourselves, self-undoing. But right alongside that isolation and addiction, it's also the house of profound spiritual surrender and transcendence. It's basically the ultimate double-edged sword of suffering and spiritual liberation.
Moving on to Section 2, traditional versus modern views.
Now, because of that intense mix of themes, astrologers have literally been arguing about how to interpret this house for centuries. And this brilliantly illustrates a clash that played out fiercely across Reddit forums between two very different astrological camps. The traditional, Hellenistic view literally called it the House of Bad Spirit and Saturn's Joy. Ancient astrologers leaned heavily into the physical manifestations, exile, forced confinement, literal hidden enemies, mental illness. But in stark contrast, the modern, more psychologically driven view, it focuses on spiritual unity, the cosmic ocean, empathy, and dissolving the boundaries of the ego. So one side leans into doom and gloom, while the other can sometimes slip into what critics might call toxic positivity, just masking real-world issues with love and light. Now, we aren't here to take a side. Instead, we want to show you that both interpretations are actually describing the exact same underlying process.
To see how these two views connect, check out this incredibly powerful insight from a Reddit user who was talking about 12th house awakenings. They wrote, "Once you realize the world isn't solid, you can never believe it's solid again, and you can't rejoin the people who are blithely relying on it to be so." Wow. See, what modern astrologers call a beautiful spiritual awakening often feels in reality exactly like the traditional house of loss. Why? Because true awakenings require the incredibly painful, disorienting loss of your previous identity and your old worldview. If all that mystical language still feels a bit, abstract, let's translate it into practical depth psychology. Like it's noted in texts like Freud astrology, these esoteric terms often map absolutely perfectly onto modern therapeutic concepts. That ancient house of bad spirit is essentially just describing repressed trauma. And those hidden enemies, they aren't usually secret agents plotting your downfall. They're your own unacknowledged shadow behaviors, operating completely beneath your awareness, just sabotaging you from the inside out.
Which brings us to Section 3, navigating the cosmic ocean.
So, what actually happens when real people live with these energies? The 12th house is like this vast, boundless body of water. And when you drop specific planets into it, they act as variables, bringing these abstract themes into the real world. Let's look at some actual examples shared by Reddit users. When the sun, which is your core identity, is in the 12th, the ego bit's hidden. One user talked about being a double Leo, which is traditionally the most boisterous, outgoing sign, but because their sun is in the 12th, they actually became deeply introverted as they got older. Another user with their moon in the 12th absorbs collective emotions, and that practically manifested in them running a homeless shelter, literally dealing with trauma every day. And my absolute favorite, a user with unpredictable Uranus in the 12th had a sudden spiritual awakening, while unexpectedly stuck in a foreign country's drunk tank after their passport was stolen. You really can't make this stuff up. The 12th house forces surrender, and it's going to use whatever planet is parked there to make sure it happens. All right, Section 4, Chiron and the Unseen Wound.
This whole idea of forced surrender perfectly segues into a deeper psychological dive. We're going to focus on one specific, highly sensitive placement inside this house, Chiron. Now, if you're new to the term, Chiron in astrology is known as the wounded healer archetype. It represents this deep, chronic wound in our psyche. But here is the absolute magic of Chiron. The specific area where you are the most profoundly wounded ultimately becomes the exact source of your greatest wisdom, compassion, and healing power for others. So what happens when this intense wound is located in the 12th house of the unseen?
Well, that really insightful text from Self-Gazer describes Chiron in the 12th house as living in the prison of the unconscious. People with this placement are born incredibly sensitive to the emotional and psychic currents going on around them. But the tragedy is, in childhood, that sensitivity is almost always pathologized. They're told they're too sensitive, or just making things up, or being dramatic. They absorb all the unspoken trauma and grief of their family systems, but because nobody validates it, they end up feeling crazy. So they develop this hypervigilance, constantly monitoring their own minds, which leads to a profound sense of spiritual homelessness and isolation. They feel totally exiled from the everyday world, yet at the same time completely cut off from trusting their own spiritual nature.
Finally, Section 5, Surrender, Healing, and Integration. Let's move to and see how this all builds together. Because remember, the wounded healer doesn't actually stay wounded forever. The traditional darkness and the modern light we talked about earlier, they're really just two sequential steps in the exact same healing process. To figure out how to heal this, we need to look across the astrological wheel to the 12th house's direct opposite, the 6th house. See, the 6th house is all about control. It's your daily habits, your structure, your physical health, your practical discipline. We love the 6th house because it makes us feel like we're the ones in charge. But the 12th house? It's the exact opposite. It demands total surrender. It's the harsh realization that you are not actually in control, and you simply must accept what is. A healthy life demands balancing both. You need the practical discipline of the 6th house to show up every day, but you absolutely have to balance it with the 12th house's spiritual surrender to let go of the outcome.
So, the crucial point is, how do we actually practically achieve this surrender? Drawing directly from the Self-Gazer analysis, here's the actionable healing journey. Step 1. Make the unconscious conscious. You've got to safely bring that repressed material to the surface. You can do this through depth therapy or even just keeping a dream journal, since remember, dreams are the native language of the 12th house. Step 2. Learn embodied solitude. This means learning how to be alone without disassociating or immediately escaping into your phone or other substances. It's about building up the tolerance to just be with yourself without feeling lost. And Step 3. Surrender the need to understand. You have to actively shift away from trying to intellectually fix your trauma and instead have the faith to just let it transform you.
When you actually do this hard work, the 12th house stops being a prison and finally becomes a sanctuary. As one incredibly eloquent Reddit user put it, this house holds the true wealth of the chart. Think of it like a trust fund that your ego just can't access until it reaches a certain level of spiritual maturity. It's one perhaps over many lifetimes, deep and instinctive. The reward for navigating all that darkness, that terrifying isolation, and those unacknowledged wounds is the profound gift of oceanic compassion. It's the ability to hold the suffering of others with total presence, serving the collective as a true guide through the invisible realms.
Which brings us to our final thought. The 12th house is not some cosmic trash can. It's not fundamentally about loss or doom or secret curses. It's about solitude, and it is a profound initiation. It violently strips away everything you think you control just to reveal the totally indestructible spirit underneath. So the question to leave you with today is this. The 12th house is not about loss. It is about solitude and initiation. What are you brave enough to face alone? Thank you so much for exploring the cosmic ocean with us, and we'll see you in the next explainer.